Hello, my name is Tony Mays and I am the Commonwealth of Learning's Education Specialist for Open Schooling. This is the 10th of 11 presentations, each of which summarizes the key issues in different chapters of COL's new publication, addressing the needs of out-of-school children and youths through expansion of open schooling. This 9th presentation reflects on Chapter 10 by Charity Bwalia and Tommy Hamaluba, Chapter 11 by Anshul Kabanda, Chapter 12 by Sheldon Samuels, and Chapter 13 by Mike Collins and Som Naidu. Chapters 10 to 13 explore developing practices of ODL and ODL provision of open schooling in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. The discussion of these chapters is organized around 5 key questions. What is happening in Africa? What is happening in Asia? What is happening in the Caribbean? And what is happening in the Pacific? And then finally, a discussion around what are the implications of these lessons of experience for our own future practice? Let us start by exploring developing practice in Africa. Although distance education is evolving in line with wider society changes, the diverse contexts mean that in many countries, all generations of distance education may be in place and/or combinations thereof. So in some areas, they might still have print-based correspondence models. In other areas, they might be using broadcast media like TV and radio. Maybe in cities and small towns, we would see growing use of ICT, and there may be possibly in only the major metropolitan areas would we have use of internet and fourth industrial revolution type approaches emphasizing technology. There are many examples of distance education practice in Africa, with several open universities, for example, the University of South Africa, one of the world's mega universities, the Open University of Tanzania, the Open University of Zimbabwe, and more recently, the Botswana Open University. And there are a growing number of open schools as well. We have the Namibian College of Open Learning in Namibia. We have the Malawi College of Distance Education. We have the Zambian College of Distance Education. We have the Institute for Distance Education in Mozambique. And we have institutions like the Institute for Adult Education in Tanzania, all reaching out to try to support out-of-school children and youths. However, there are a number of challenges to further expansion of open schooling provision in Africa. These relate to issues such as digitization, policy, funding, personnel, commercialization at the expense of public good, cost, the need for technical support, and Africa is particularly rich in languages, so it's sometimes difficult to know which languages we should be developing content and courses in to reach the most people. So now let us move on to Asia. This graph indicates that while impressive improvements were made in reducing the numbers of out-of-school children from the end of the 20th century, the reduction of the curve is flattening out. This indicates the need to accelerate the provision of open schooling in Asia if it is to meet the education for all at the schooling level by 2030. Asia has moved very strongly into the digital realm, with growing use both of open educational resources and massive open online courses. And here are a few illustrations of some of the more popular platforms. Of the 40 countries in Asia, only Bangladesh, Brunei Darussalam, India, Malaysia, the Maldives, Pakistan, Singapore, and Sri Lanka are members of the Commonwealth. There is extensive use of ODL for higher education in Asia, but NIOS in India is the largest of a number of providers of open schooling. Now we move to the Caribbean. This chapter focuses on the English-speaking islands in the Caribbean, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the mainland nations of Belize and Guyana. Two of the key role players unifying the region are CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, comprising 20 countries and representing about 16 million citizens, and the Caribbean Examinations Council, which leads curriculum development and reform in the use of OER. Both bodies recognize the importance of ODL and OER. In Belize, as an example of experience, the provision of open schooling follows various models in response to different needs and different contexts. Finally, we move to the Pacific. Open education in the Pacific is well developed in New Zealand, but less so in the smaller Pacific nations. The chapter explores case studies of provision in New Zealand, the Southwest Pacific region, Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and Fiji. Te Kura in New Zealand was established almost 100 years ago as the Correspondence School of New Zealand. More than 22,000 students are enrolled annually. This includes those who enrolled at other state education providers and students beyond compulsory school age. Any young New Zealander between 16 and 19 years of age and not in employment, education or training can choose to enroll for free, providing Te Kura with the opportunity to have a positive impact on a large number of students. In 2019, Te Kura also enrolled almost 6,000 young adult students across the full range of Te Kura offerings. In response to the COVID-19 crisis, Te Kura made its content and a copy of its LMS open to all secondary schools in New Zealand. Although not directly involved with open schooling, the Open Polytechnic in New Zealand offers routes back into formal education for children and youths who have dropped out of school. And although not working directly with out-of-school children and youths, the University of the South Pacific is supporting research in this area in partnership with COL and has expertise and infrastructure that can be tapped into. Flexible, open and distance education in Papua New Guinea provides opportunities for children and youths who have been unable to access schooling or who have dropped out of schooling to complete their studies using an alternative open and distance learning model. The island nation of Vanuatu experienced several disasters in 2020. COVID-19, Tropical Storm Harold, volcanic ash and drought, which all impacted negatively on the schooling system. These disasters have resulted in the temporary suspension of open schooling programs and activities that had been initiated in 15 pilot schools. All schools throughout the country closed their doors for over 3 months, making it difficult to implement open schooling activities since open schooling learners use school campuses after hours. We are hoping that in 2021 we will be able to get things back on track. When COL received a request from the Ministry of Education in Fiji to support teachers with continuity of learning during school campus closures due to COVID-19, we developed a short course using open educational resources for online learning and introduction. The course was the product of a collaborative project between COL and the Packfold Learn initiative, hosted by the University of the South Pacific. Over 700 teachers in Fiji participated. A new initiative, financially supported by New Zealand, will support expansion of ODFL in the region. Learners who successfully complete schooling or open schooling equivalent programs through open and online learning will find new employment and educational opportunities open up to them. In addition to obtaining a recognized qualification or credential, they will have developed the independent study skills and dispositions that make it more likely that they will choose open and online learning for any further technical or vocational education and training or higher education that they may pursue in the course of their lifelong learning. The systems model introduced in the introduction to this publication should therefore probably be extended as we have illustrated below. So we have a schooling subsystem with face-to-face schooling for young learners, hybrid and blended schooling for older learners, and open schooling for those who can't get to schools. But we would like to build on that opportunities in the TVET sector with open TVET provision, and in the higher education sector with open higher education. So what are the implications for the future? After you have read through chapters 10 to 13, we think it would be useful to have a discussion around questions like the following. What have you learned from the Africa case study? What have you learned from the Asia study, the Caribbean case study, and the Pacific case study? And then what recommendations do you have about open learning and open schooling in your own context? As with all COL resources, this resource is available under a CC Share Alike International Open License. And we thank you for your time, and we look forward to the discussions that will follow.